biggest problem that plagues our captains of industry today, it's governance, risk, and compliance. Business leaders are inherently afraid of the what if and when a cybersecurity event is going to take down their business. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Are we secure? Are we in compliance? How do we know? These are questions every titan of industry has, keeping them up at night. But if you were to ask those questions directly, it would send them into a spiral of agitation because there's no easy way for them to answer. Until now. Governance, risk, and compliance is now easy. We've removed siloed processes and have integrated them into one easy-to-use interface. We've removed inefficiencies, fragmentation of risk, duplication of effort, and most importantly, blind spots. We give you confidence knowing that your cybersecurity risk is under control, so you can concentrate more on running your business. Who are we? We are Catanate. We are a technology company with deep expertise in governance, risk, and compliance. We've created some amazing tools to make GRC efficient and easy. And we would love to share our technology with you. Catanate. We make compliance easy.
Hola, Surf Dog here. Awesome show for you coming up here. We've got Gerald Auger from Simply Cyber. He's a GRC nerd. And we've got John Whalen from Catanate. He also is a GRC nerd. And as of today, I'm a GRC nerd. But so the way this rolls is, Gerald, we're going to introduce yourself. You can talk about your own podcast, plug that, and then we'll go over to John. Go for it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Craig, aka Surf Dog. I loved that intro. That intro was super sick. And thanks for having me on the Hackerverse podcast. For those who don't know me, my name is Gerald Auger. I've been working in the InfoSec industry for about 20 years, and I'm one of the rare breeds that came up exclusively on the GRC track. I did dabble in the red academically, like every one of us has, and I've had to be a blue teamer because when you're a team of like one or a team of three, you're a blue teamer too, surprise. Yeah. But yeah, like my bones, my strength, my forte is all up in GRC and kind of cutting through the bull crap of it and getting to the meat of actual cyber risk reduction. That's my jam. So super fun, super pumped to have this conversation today. John, who are you?
Hi, I'm John. I specialize in technical control assessments, and I grew up in the Army, and they taught me how to send the internet over radios. And guess what? You really can't make any mistakes when you have to touch a thing called a klystron. And there's a lot of things that can get really hurt when you have to configure a klystron. So one of the things I realized through my whole expanse and working with some of the components in the Department of Defense is you really have to have good documentation, and that documentation has to, assign to a control. And if you have a control and you don't map it to something, it's not going to get done. So that's who I am. And thanks for the time today.
Absolutely. I didn't even know what a klystron is. I just Googled that. It's this like linear beam vacuum tube. Looks like a huge laser machine. What the heck is that?
Exactly. And that's how I first learned how to use computer systems. So start with that, and then you can learn C. And then after you learn C, you can go on from there.
Oh my God. What do they even use that for? Now I'm curious.
So it's to amplify a radio transmission.
Oh, I get you.
Yeah. You take
is that before you bounce it off the atmosphere?
Exactly. Yes. That's it.
Nice,
Send it up to the troposphere and bring it back down.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna put that in the chat. Well, that was cute. That was cool. Hey, well, so it's all about GRC. I don't know. I'm kind of getting involved in that myself with this engagement that I have during the day with this e-commerce company. I came in there, just started recently, and I'm interfacing with the GRC teams, and I'm like, well, are you compliant? How do you know? If you're not, how do we get you there? And so I'm like, these are all questions I have. And you guys probably know the answers on how to do all that stuff, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll, if it's more of a, ramp into the pool instead of the stairs into the pool. I feel like the ramps are pretty popular now. If it's a ramp into the pool, I'll wade into the water here, Craig, and then John, you can fact check me as appropriate. So, the one thing you said right off the rip is, are we compliant or not? Welcome to the party. Maximum compliance equals minimum security. So that's kind of the first axiomatic truth to accept. Another fun fact to accept is that compliance is, on paper, it's very Boolean, right? It's like yes or no. You're compliant or you're not compliant. But in reality, there's a lot of gray in the compliance world. Like, okay, like here's a classic one, Craig, right? Like, this control says we need multi-factor authentication. Awesome. Okay, so you logged into your email and you got challenged for MFA. All right, cool. So thumbs up, we're compliant. Next question. Okay, whoa. What about like service accounts? What about vendor accounts? What about logins to the ERP applications? What about logging into remote access for the manufacturing vendors? Like, there's a million. Okay, I always exaggerate and say a million. There's easily 15 to 25 different types of, like, not user accounts, but like literally like types of user accounts. And we looked at one for multi-factor, and that's not enough. But when you're doing your compliance checklist, and if you have an auditor that is not worth a crap, you're going to be compliant thumbs up and you're not actually secure. So like right off the rip, those are two things that always jump out to me as like, like compliance very Boolean to everybody that's outside the bubble. But when you're in the bubble, it's like, oh my God, how are you guys surviving in here? John, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. There's so many, there's a lot of FUD, right? There's a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt. And I think the important thing is like, computers are just code, and we're seeing, we have infrastructure as code, we have policy as code, and there's a very shift left approach to where, as you're developing, right, we have to think about first the processor, because like when you think about computer systems, right, when we built computer systems in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they were machines that did math, and you really couldn't develop any other languages on them, right? They were like light switches that did a lot of things for you. And then we started getting into being able to develop within that environment, right? So then we develop a software, we develop applications, and you start to add these layers. And that's where it goes back to like, I talk to so many people who don't understand the fundamentals of the OSI model, and they misunderstand layers 1, 2, and 3, right? How's this physical and data and network? And you see people who can, go and execute some tactical procedure on a machine and get that root certificate, but then they can't come back and talk to what is the business process, right? And that's like the difference between a company that buys IBM and then somebody who riffs things together, and they're like, we got Slack and we got Discord and we do some of our business on these systems. Where I think like, it's how do you take technology, how do you deploy it, how do you manage it, and how do you get users to understand how to control information? And I like to use analogies like houses, right? Your front door, your windows, those are things that you lock, and it's a way to control information. And if your closet has a lock, but then it doesn't work, it's not really as big of a problem as if your front door didn't work, right? Like, okay, I can fix it. I can fix it next week. I can fix it next month. Maybe you just change it. And I think a lot of people get away from having those discussions first, and just figuring out like where does this fit inside the business?
Absolutely. And I would throw it to you, Craig, around this question. So, John and I are weathered, beat up, like ridden hard and put up wet GRC guys. You just kind of going into it, I'd be kind of curious, like your thoughts of it initially thinking, as far as like a program goes, where do your thoughts go on like what is step one for your program?
My immediate thought is this is a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
my immediate thought was, wow, this is I don't know where to start, but let me try and figure it out. So I start by asking, okay, what do we have to be compliant with, right? So, e-commerce company, obviously, PCI applies. We do business around the world, so GDPR applies. California has their own thing. So, and then interfacing with the team that's actually been doing this before I got to the company, asked them, can you give me a list? And they did. So these are all the things that we have to be compliant with, and we don't know where we're at on those. I'm like, okay, what's next? I know, and then I talk to people like John. I say, where do I start? And he says, well, you can start with this tool that I built, and it's 800, NIST 853 compliant. So I crack open. It's been a while. I've looked at 853 before, but cracked it open, and there's like 1,100 controls. I'm like, holy effing shit.
Yeah.
My entire day for the next 3 years is going to be consumed with controls.
But it doesn't have to be that way, right?
It doesn't. No. Yeah.
Because I hear that part. I hear where everybody says, but it seems so much. But realistically, everybody already knows what to do, right? It's that they don't know how to document it effectively. And I think that's where you get into these miscommunications and people are troubleshooting, what's paragraph F-4 in this book, when it's like, look, you've got users in your environment who don't understand the difference between a password, a passphrase, right? And they don't know where to encrypt or decrypt information. And that's really that's what I see, right? Like, ask somebody to send you an encrypted email.
Yeah. I guess I've been Googling a bunch of stuff, and I guess maybe there have already been attempts, but it's kind of like, for the For Dummies series, it's kind of like, if you don't have any clue, here's the flow chart where you start, and here's the easy way to sort of wade into the pool, I guess.
Yeah.
Would be helpful.
I would say, like for an individual like you, Craig, where like, okay, you walk in and you don't have any prior GRC experience, and they're like, we need you to protect our organization. Not infinite checkbook, but you have a lot of latitude on what you can do and what you want to do. What I would say is, yes, compliance is wicked important, and eventually you're going to be asked about it. But what is a really beneficial way to approach it is through a framework, right? So if you're a smaller organization or you're one person shop, CIS 18 is a really popular option. This kind of gets you up and running. And spoiler alert, by the way, any framework you're going to use, I don't care if it's something as, robust and fat as a NIST 853 high baseline, or if it's something super lightweight like a CIS 18, which is as light as you're going to get. Almost always, you're going to get like 80% of the same controls, right? It's the other 20% that you get into the nuance and, oh, this is what makes ISO so special, or like, ooh, I came up with my own framework and this is why I'm special. It's like, bro, 80% is the same. You just reskinned it. Like, we all get it. So I would do, but by doing CIS 18 and kind of approaching it that way, you're coming at it from the other direction, from a cyber risk reduction perspective, instead of coming at it from a compliance perspective. And what I would suggest to you, Craig, to save you, again, this is 20 years of pain and scarring and just like PTSD and therapy. Listen, at one point, you're going to bust your hump, right? Complying with GDPR. You're like, oh, look at all this GDPR. Ooh, look at all this PCI. And then, like, a new regulation's going to come out, or a new standard, or new something. And they're going to be like, hey, check it out, Craig. We got a new compliance framework. Like, let us know how we're doing. And you just, like, want to rip your hair out. And you're like, So, however, if you come from the framework perspective, all you have to do is like shake the Yahtzee container and let the dice fall back down into this new compliance framework, and your controls will still map. At least 80% of them. Okay, these are like secrets from the GRC nerd dungeon. Okay, like I'm probably gonna lose my GRC card, Craig, telling you all these secrets, because you're supposed to go through the gauntlet to get there. But it's no rules Friday up in here.
Speaking of no rules, what's this we got? We're looking at here.
Oh, that's actually your feed of your stream, so don't sweat that. I mean, if you want, I could pull up the framework. So I was just watching the health of your stream and talking to the Simply Cyber audience, who are live in chat as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your stream is doing healthy right now. You got 18 concurrent people up in here. Good health on the connections. From a production perspective, this is a little peek behind the curtain for the audience. They don't typically get to see all this hot action.
Oh, yeah, look at that right there. Cool.
That's awesome.
John, you were going to show
Yeah. So we'll do that. Let me just get entire screen one.
Well, while John's getting that, let me say shout out to the people in chat. This is amazing. James McQuiggan's up here, a whole left coast contingent. I don't know if either of you guys are in Pacific Standard Time, but there's a strong Cali or West Coast group in here right now. CatGPT, obviously. So, what's up, everybody?
How do you do the West Coast thing? There we go.
Central Florida representing. I love it.
So, all right. I want to show this first before we go into any of the tooling, because I think that being able to draw some diagrams when we talk about like what are we trying to govern, right? Like why are we trying to set rules? And Gerald, you said something really interesting about consequences, right? And there's new frameworks that focus on consequence informed, right? Or cyber informed, consequence driven, because that's really what we're looking at, right? Because like we've got a malicious cyber actor and we see them, they're persistent. They show up to work all the time. And ultimately like anything in security is you want to deter that malicious cyber actor to abandon their efforts, right? That's really the point. Like, what are we doing cybersecurity for? That's what we want to do. And then when we get into business and somebody wants to know why are you spending money on computer systems, we get to that in a minute. Once we deter them and there's that persistent one who breaks through, right? We want to protect our information and prevent it from compromise. Like that's the goal of governance, risk, and compliance, right? You want to govern those systems, you want to protect and prevent them, and that's going to be different in every single industry, right? Every vertical is going to have its own threat actors, its own risks, its own systems that are going to be unique. Then we have to be able to detect, and this is where GRC is so imperative for success, especially when you integrate your engineers, your architects, your developers. And there are some unifying languages, right? These frameworks tell you what should or shouldn't happen with that software. And then to do that, we have to be able to determine proactive, detective, responsive actions and controls. The really easy thing to explain about a control is think about like you put a lock on a door. That is a control. It prevents somebody from using that lock without a key. If that threat actor is really persistent, they might break the door. But you have to, how many people are going to be bringing a battering ram through that door? That's where to think about it. Detective, those are all the things that are like logging. And I see so many organizations that don't have a good logging system. They haven't read the funnel of fidelity and they haven't had computers look at these things, right? And then responsive, what do you do when a control is breached? And there's so few people who have their security teams who also understand the controls that their different teams are responsible for. And I'll go into that. So that's where we get into adaptability. And I think one other component that I want to go into before we dive into that is systems.
That's a big map.
Oh, this goes into everything because you have to have pain points, right? We're going to get into systems analysis real quick.
The picture looks painful.
I know. Actually, well, before we get into systems analysis, to really understand how to write good GRC, you have to set objectives, scopes, and boundaries. Your phase one is where we talk about events and cyber events, right? And then we come up with a scoring system that's persistent to your environment. So we talked about CIS 18. You could map CIS 18 to this, just like Gerald was saying, 80% of the things are going to overlap here. Phase two, information gathering. This is what all of the penetration testers and hackers should be really good at doing, right? Be able to get system diagrams, interviews, and manuals of every system that exists in the organization, right? And then define your system description. When you've got those components, you could set those boundary conditions and really examine your technical approach, targeting details, your system targeting profile, right? When we talk about governing risk across enterprise systems, right? We need to understand what does that system do for the business. If it's something that's irrelevant, it's probably going to be lower on there. Determine your critical needs, attack scenarios based on your environment, and then go through your exercises with attack payload for your HCE, your high consequence event.
See,
yeah.
now that you've even presented this, like I'm already, as a noob, my brain is already frozen.
Oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't the goal.
I know. I'm just telling you where I'm at. So did you cover risk calculation? How do we? That's one of my big questions. Is I have to calculate risk for this organization. How do I do that? Do I just take the total revenue, divide it by
No. Don't. I wish to God, I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna lose my mind if I hear Craig, I'm sorry you stepped on a landmine. It has nothing to do with you. If I hear another one of these ALE calculations in a freaking Sec Plus book, I'm going to flip my desk. You cannot account. You can't the concepts of 1940s fraud accounting cannot be applied. Thank you. They can't be applied in cyber. It scales too much. It's freaking ridiculous. Get out of here with that noise. Okay. Yeah, calculating risk is wicked hard, Craig. And, it's almost, there is a methodology, but we're getting deep into the weeds here called FAIR, F-A-I-R. There is a FAIR risk assessment methodology that does properly give you percentages on likelihood of incidents occurring. But this is where you cannot do this calculation on your own. You actually need the business to inform you on this one, because you need to understand what critical business processes are. How do they make money here? Oh, well, we sell widgets. Okay, well, what's the product? Show me the entire supply chain from raw products coming in to product going out or widgets going out and you guys selling them. Show me that. And everything in there is mission critical. You're never going to get anyone at the business to sit down with you and tell you those things, unfortunately. And there's now I can almost feel like deep breaths coming, because it's so much PTSD, dude, with the business doesn't tell you these things. You only find out when it's red hot. Documentation is expired the second you put it on paper. Craig, by the end of this podcast, Craig's gonna be I'm quitting. I'm gonna find a new job tomorrow. What I would advise, though, or at least what I always recommend, is go for the obvious low-hanging fruit. You can go in and multi-factor absolutely needs to be put in place. End user awareness training that is effective needs to be put in place. Make sure that, and this is really tactical, but make sure that everybody in IT doesn't have a domain admin account, right? There's just some low-hanging, obvious, high-risk things that you can, in my opinion, you can make a tactical project and execute against those while doing your risk assessment of where you are against a framework or against a baseline of security controls or whatever. What's in place, what's not in place, what's kind of partially in place and requires follow-up. And then by the time you finish the high risk, low hanging fruit, you'll have, that'll probably take you 3 to 6 months. You'll be in a position to roll out what your new strategy is and how much it's going to cost and whose help do you need. That's another sad reality, John, of GRC. We don't patch computers, spoiler alert. I need IT to do that. I don't introduce offboarding processes. HR does that. So here you go, Allison, here's a bucket of chicken, or Carl, here's a dozen donuts. Please be my friend and do your part so I can do my job.
Yeah. And I've sat on so many audits where, there's just such a big gap. You have one IT administrator, and really, I think what we're looking for in this intersectionality of business processes and computer systems, right, is explaining it to the non-technical audience, as somebody can walk away and say, I understand why the people in that room get paid a lot of money to sit there, because they're actually working on a really technical system, right? If you look at site reliability engineers, you're talking about people who are studying the metrics of an internet connection and looking for latencies in the hundredths or millionths of a second, right? these giant data centers are precision machines, and you've got people doing intricate stuff on them. And like, really, you're just saying, hey, this team of developers and engineers, they all come together, they sit in this room, and they deliver something, right, that people use. And what is that, right? Software, anything that you can do repeated can be turned into software as a service. Doesn't mean AI is going to take your job. No. Does it mean you can leverage tools and systems to write and predict for you? Yeah. I posted something on LinkedIn earlier about how to quantify risk mathematically, and a lot of people were really upset in the comments, but computers are math, and you can assign values, right? And that's what your EDR solutions are doing. You're looking at volumes, and you're saying when something happens, when a threshold is exceeded, send an alert, right? And what does an alert do? Hopefully a human sees it and knows how to take action. Remember, I was talking about the security controls. If you've got somebody in your tier 1 SOC and they don't know how to look at a histogram or historical graphs and say, I think there's something here, right? It doesn't matter about how many tools they can use, right? It goes into like, how does your system run? I've got a development lab I work on. It's been on for 120 days. I have not had to, and I've gone through change control processes. And I see a lot of people set up labs, but what I don't see is people set up, how do you do systems engineering? How do you as a person, how do you in this role understand the systems engineering behind it, right? I worked on a project once. We had 4 classified systems, right? And they were several years old. How many changes happened? And there was no change control log, right? So when I'm going in there and I'm doing an update because I'm doing vulnerability management, right? I'm working with the development team for what they produced. I'm working with the customer service because they're telling me the customers can't make it this software to work anymore. And everybody's mad at me because I updated Adobe. So like that goes into, that's a risk, right? If your production environment goes down because you updated Adobe, and here's one for the world. One time I was on a project and I tanked a stack with 80,000 users. And that's a risk, right? What happens to the business when 80,000 users can't log in? And I can tell you that some of those things can become catastrophic if your system failover process creates redundancies or cyclical loops in other systems, right? Thankfully, this tech stack didn't cause a cascading failure, but it did cause a significant outage, 80,000 users, over 4 hours. And those are people who couldn't go to work. They couldn't process their time. That's a supervisor, a manager. How much did that organization lose? A lot. What did we realize? That when we planned that meeting, that we had to account for that failover process. Now, that's part of it, right? When you have a SaaS, when you have users on there, and we get into these progressive web apps, right? That's what we're delivering. We're delivering services that when you pick up your phone in 2023, you can connect with somebody across the other way, and it's seamless, right? Because think about this: 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been having this nice of a conversation, right, with 3 streams at 4K. And that's really where this goes into. These edge systems are really powerful. A lot of business and the economy runs on them, and businesses don't realize that they can leverage software and they can secure that software to fit their business's model, right? And my last piece of advice is, if you have horizontal sprawl and your business keeps adding more and more services horizontally, right, figure out what's going on and how you can centralize some of those processes. So I don't know, Gerald, Craig.
I don't know. You just confused the hell out of me.
Oh no.
Well, so I guess one thing I'd share with you, Craig, or again, I feel like now, for those who are just joining the stream, I see Alana and Pursuit of Bliss and some others showing up here, kind of midstream. We, John and I, are seasoned, weather-beaten, just broken GRC professionals, and Craig, for some reason, is like, I'm all in. Let me in. I want in on this action. So we're breaking it down for Craig as best we can. And I'm probably going to get my GRC card pulled here pretty soon for revealing too many secrets. But let me tell you, Craig, what I would say, and this is a critical thing that I think early in my career, I thought I could achieve it. And I don't know if it's because I'm seasoned now and I know the difference or because it's more mainstream. But you cannot secure a system. Okay, that's a fact. And I champion this, John. I've just met you, but like, it shouldn't be called cybersecurity. It should be called cyber resiliency. But cybersecurity is too sexy and it's got too much street cred, so it's never going to be called cyber resiliency. But that's what it is. We are not trying to secure a system. We're trying to make it difficult to get into, and then when it is, that the impact of that operation is minimal to business operations. Because at the end of the day, and I got a sounder for this one, it's all about straight cash. They don't care about InfoSec. They don't care about lead 0 days. They care about making money. And cyber resiliency is about keeping the system making money. And having said that, to John's point, using the change control example, like, you can't check every single edge case to make sure that a change is going to work correctly in production. What you can do is test the crap out of it, hope for the best that it won't break anything, and have a rollback plan to recover as quickly as possible, again, to limit the impact of bad happening in your environment. But at the end of the day, all we're doing is trying to reduce cyber risk, but it's like taking it's like walking towards a wall and always walking half the distance. Yeah, your first 2 steps, you're going to close 75% of the distance, but you will never get to the wall. You will always take half the remaining distance and you will never reach it. And that's what our job is. And once you accept the grim reality that you're never going to reach 100%, then you can be at peace with this and accept this, and then move forward at helping businesses manage their cyber risk.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I can relax. I can kick back a little bit now.
Yeah, feet up, dude.
But I have a feeling John has a tool that can help.
Yeah.
Could that be the case? What is this?
It could be. So all that we're talking about with GRC, and I think what gets missed a lot, is there's so many terrible platforms that you can't. We just want to convey data, right? What does a configuration mean, right? I showed you other graphics, and when we look at managing people and teams and systems and all of this projects, right? It makes more sense if we can visualize and understand what people are doing. And we can do that by leveraging data to talk about this, right? We've got these frameworks. Those frameworks we can apply and quantify and qualify, a value, right? Like Gerald was saying, businesses want those systems to be on and continue to make money. And when you do security, that's also a time to optimize. So here we've got, what teams are informed. So we see that our cyber legal team is informed about 58% of those controls. And I know like this gets kind of in the weeds of like, what would you convey this to? But this lets you kind of understand like, okay, when we're working on a project, we've informed these domains in the cybersecurity framework, right? Like we talked about CIS 18. So we see that, okay, when we talked about a control, we informed the cyber legal advisor. Great. We informed the knowledge manager. Probably important, right? We informed our cyber operators of a control, and we realized that they've got 1.7%. So when you look at this holistically, and we're talking about risk and security and communication, right? If I were going to bring somebody in and ask questions about the status of something, well, there's 2 groups that seem to have a large portion of this pie, and then when we talk about who's consulted for a control, right? We can assign those roles about who's consulted. So it lets us break down and visualize what we're trying to do with our data, how we're trying to secure it. And we can also map controls to the team roles. So like when we look at this at that 25 or 50,000 foot view, right? This is an example of a project we've planned for 48 hours, right? But when you go and assign that work to the rest of your team, there's actually 112 hours of project time that need to be considered. And like when you're working on enterprise systems and teams, you can get really expensive sprawl. And you can get stuck, hiring more contractors to try to develop something. So this is where GRC can help you predict, right? We said we need this to work, and we've planned initially for 48. We need 112. Craig, if you had a gap like this, what might you do?
112 hours?
Yeah, so you plan for 48, and then when you get through all of your project planning, right, it comes out that you actually need 112 hours of development time.
So I need to go on Upwork and find some developers.
Exactly, right? And that's GRC. That your GRC team should be able to tell you how to optimize your project management and your security, right? Just like Gerald said, we're not securing a system, we're making that system work better. And you can use control frameworks to control a system.
How would I use this in a very simple pick a control, a common one, like a beginner one, and show me how to do that.
We're gonna do some control engineering. Let's see.
You're gonna rail me for saying beginner?
No, I think all of it,
No, there's good controls. There's controls with training wheels for sure.
Yeah, let's pick one. We can do one together. Hold on, we'll do some cards. Now, the great thing here, this has all of the NIST risk management framework, all 1168. You don't have to pick them all. I think what's important is realize that when you're building a system, these systems also have secondary dependencies for some of those controls. And that's why people say GRC is hard. So I don't know. What's a control we want to engineer?
Well, AC2 is always a popular one. It's kind of massive, but I don't know how, if you're going to choose a big one, AC2 is a nice, easy one for everyone to wrap their head around. Also, you could do, I'm reaching into the annals of my mind here to take it back, but maybe RA5, I think that's like vulnerability scanning, or RA3. Okay. That's an easy one. It's like, there's no sub controls.
Yeah, account management is difficult because there's over 22 secondary controls.
Well, that's what I was saying. You know what the worst is, by the way, for like all of the GRC people in chat, I see Alana in chat. AC2 is like, it's like when you launch 853 and you're like, got all the gumption and excitement of you're going to build a GRC program. AC1 is the first control you reach, and it's a policy document. You're like, whip it out, crush a policy. You're like, dude, I'm going to go get a coffee and a taco. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Then AC2 is the next control, and it basically just mushes your face into the wall, and you're like, oh, like my soul's broken. Yeah. So vuln scanning's a good one. That's a pretty tight one.
Yeah. So what are we doing here? I'm going to drop these in the chat. I can pull. Oh gosh, hold on. Restream is always an exciting experience.
Yeah. How this would be really useful for somebody like me is because they're like, even with like CMMC, there's different levels, right? There's like, well, here's your beginner level, and which is not very secure or not very cyber resilient, we should say. And then there's like level 2. It's level 3. It would be cool if this thing had like, okay, you're new, welcome. Here's level 1. These are the controls that you need to go through and check.
Sure. Yeah. And like what we're seeing right now is all of NIST 853. I will get together a CIS 18 version, but I think, the most important part, right, if we're going to back it up to understanding it, is understand what your business is, who your customers are, and the threats that are applicable to your organization, right? Mm-hmm. If you make dairy, you have an entire different threat group than, say, somebody who is in B2B financial transactions, right? Those threat actors are different. And that's where you first start with your controls, right? What type of environment? It's just like, if you were going to cook and you're going to have a kitchen, you should probably also have what? A fire extinguisher.
We're going to see a cow. We're going to see a cow hacking village.
Yeah. So like, it's really thinking about we know good practices, right? Accounts, not everybody needs admin. We should be using systems that are, write once and read many. We see that. But anyway, let's jump into RA5, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, C, D, and E. So this is like a really large project. And I think like when we want to talk about vulnerabilities, it goes back to what's running on those systems and how can those systems be compromised. And what makes something vulnerable is when you can compromise it without having to be in there. Imagine if somebody could just reach into your house and turn the internet off by driving by. That's a different threat than like, oh, they need root level access and accredited things to make a system change. So like enumerating platforms. How you would do this, right? If we were going to build this out, is we would write in our requirements what type of systems we're running. So let's take a system, right? For example, that's vulnerable or that's in the business that we need to quantify for, and we're going to build a vulnerability assessment live.
Like a front end web app that has windows into the.
Okay. Front end web app. So we need to make sure that let's build this out. What are your requirements to understand how frequently do you want to monitor this for vulnerabilities, and how will you monitor it?
It's a good question. How frequent? Maybe once a week. I'd probably use a scanner of some sort. Okay.
So we're going to scan weekly. And then who is going to analyze that report? Because we got to assign some people to it.
Well, it's probably going to be me.
All right. So we're just going to have Craig will review. All right. So we've done that. Here's a beautiful thing. Our documentation and last update was just done. We're gonna go in. So we now have to think about how many hours is this going to take us on this project, right? Mm-hmm. You got to do some research. You've got to have some discovery calls, right? Because you're going to buy a service, and then you got to have some engineering and some architecture too. So let's run this. Pick some numbers. 120.
In terms of hours, well,
yeah.
So like we already have a scanner.
Sure.
So it's scanning. I just need to read the report once a week.
All right. So if you've already got a scanner, but we need to have other discussions. Let's plan for 5 hours, right? That's going to be some discovery. That's going to be all those components.
Okay.
And then you got to consider the design, right? We're looking for vulnerabilities on a front end web scanner. What vulnerabilities are the most commonly exploited in this industry, and on that hardware and software?
I mean, the OWASP top 10 is the obvious one.
Sure. So we need and when we find those, we have to be able to say, how much does this cost for those teams to re-engineer? Because if you find something that's an OWASP top 10, and let's say you've got some cross-site scripting, right? How long is it going to take for your developers to go in and solve that problem?
Yeah, no clue. I don't know. We could pull any number, right?
Right. Right. But you see, all of a sudden, like now the GRC team has become the team of numbers, right? So, and then, your implementation. How are you going to implement this? How does the business process change here? Who's going to be responsible? Because it can't just be Craig that's responsible for this, right? So, does this get integrated to your security brief quarterly? We want to know those statuses. And then you can set your project timeline. Like realistically, let's work on this for another week. And then how are you going to maintain it? Who's going to be responsible for coming in and maintaining this control?
Yeah. Well, so it's all, I'm going to be doing the weekly review, right?
Mm-hmm. But is that the person, if you're doing the review, let's talk separation of duties, right? Maybe Gerald, if you want to dive into separation of duties.
Well, I'm wondering, can you document that no one, and then it's identified as a gap?
Sure. Yeah, that's totally.
Yeah, because there's gaps all over the place. Remember I was telling you earlier at the beginning of the stream about compliance not being Boolean?
Right.
This is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this is a plan. And there's times that like you may not have somebody who's maintaining a control. That's okay. You've got other controls. You've got compensating controls. And then, you could run in your exceptions, like what's not going to get scanned, why is it not going to get scanned? And then here's the magic, right? You could add those teams that would be responsible for that work and understand what controls they're responsible for. But that's how much work it takes to build a GRC program. It's why people avoid this. But once you have a plan, it makes it easier to start working off of that plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I get you.
But this is all the stuff that it takes that time. And this is why people say GRC is difficult. And this is where you see, infrastructure as code, HashiCorp, right? They're doing these. We see a lot of things that scale in cloud where we're leveraging code to build infrastructure instead of trying to do it this other approach.
So that it begs the question of, that's just one control, and we just added how many hours of work onto our development team, and so multiply that times how many?
Well, you don't have to check them all, right? I think don't look at the whole horse. Just look at the ones you're selecting.
Yeah. NIST 853 should be thought of as a dictionary.
Right. It's not a entire roadmap. You pick the things that you need to control your environment, right? And if that's granular mobile access and containerized devices that run in isolation because you're processing some sensitive information, then that's what that is for your industry.
Okay. I think I get it.
But
yeah, and that's why well, now we're getting into nuances, but John's tool is going to work because it's really framework agnostic. Like it's got the 53 controls, but every framework's got crosswalks between this control and this control because, as I said before, 80% of all frameworks are identical, so there's crosswalks all over the place. For me personally, I'm a huge advocate. CIS 18 is the training wheels framework, but I'm a huge advocate of NIST cybersecurity framework. Anyone who's watching on Simply Cyber right now knows dang well because I've got the I Heart NIST emotes I just dropped. Listen, NIST cybersecurity framework, what's really cool, Craig, is it has industry profiles that are basically overlays that you can be like, oh, I work in manufacturing, and you pick up the manufacturing overlay and you just kind of think of it almost as like a Play-Doh. You remember Play-Doh? You'd have the you put all the Play-Doh in, and then you'd pull the lever down, and whatever graphic thing that you had, it would pump out. So it'd be like a triangle, then a cylinder, and then whatever. Think of the profile as that's what it is. It's like industry, whatever industry. Manufacturing is a circle, healthcare is a triangle, and you put the right one in front of it, and you pull the lever, and the CSF comes out with the controls that you need for your industry. And that's a great starting point, right? I mean, obviously, to John's point, if you're in manufacturing, but you're manufacturing quantum computers, that's a little different than manufacturing ball bearings, right? So maybe some of your controls change a little bit, especially around insider threat or oh my God, intellectual property and stuff like that. So, but it gives you a great starting point. Again, I'm a huge advocate. You'll hear me say 80% all the time because I firmly believe in the 80-20 rule. So profile gets you 80% of the way there. NIST CSF for the win.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. You don't look that old to remember the Play-Doh thing. Honestly, do they even still make that thing?
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, I do have young children, so I've pulled my fair share of Play-Doh out of places that it shouldn't be.
Carpet.
So
I don't need to know.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about all of this, really there's words that are effective for GRC, and some of those are assessment boundaries, enclaves, security control, and compensating control. And don't worry about there's a million things to choose from. It goes back to what are you going to scope and how are you going to scope it, and that's really it, because the approach of how you would secure your phone, like a smart switch are totally different,
Mm-hmm. I
or
think
making ball bearings.
I'm more interested in this Play-Doh thing now. Oh, look, you can make ice cream. Oh, that's pretty cool. I wouldn't eat
But
it.
don't eat it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, this is all really helpful. I mean, there's some things I learned today that I didn't know about. CIS 18.
Yeah.
I knew of the NIST CSF, but didn't know that it's kind of like a CIS 18.
Oh yeah, the CSF is hot, Craig. Like in the Pantheon, you know that Will Ferrell meme where from Zoolander, where he's like petting the cat and he's like, "Oh, it's so
I've
hot."
used that. Yeah.
Like NIST cybersecurity framework is so hot. Like it's so good, especially because most traditional frameworks, like all of them, have always just said like, "Here are your controls," right? And they don't really emphasize or put priority on certain things over other things. NIST cybersecurity framework was actually designed by what I would consider practitioners who live inside of organizations, and it really was developed in a consensus between a public-private partnership with NIST and industry, but whatever. So the CSF is left of boom and right of boom. So it's 5 phases, right? Identify and protect. These are GRC functions. This is left of boom, get it all in place beforehand. And then right of boom is your detect, your respond, your recover. And that is where SecOps and Blue Team lives. And they're given equal weight. Although I will say, if you've ever looked at anyone's implementation of a NIST CSF, it looks like a ramp because everything on the left is like full built. And then it goes all the way down to like recovery. It's like, we do back, like we can restore from backups. That's it. Like, but let's just be fair. Anyways, I'm a huge NIST CSF fan. If I could, I would. Well, I wouldn't get it tattooed on me, but like I'm close. Like I love myself some CSF.
You were going to get.
You could do a temporary tattoo.
Yeah, exactly, like a water rub on one for a few days.
You
Some
can get
Sharpie.
your hacker mask tattooed on.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about these self-assessment tools that are out there? I've run across a couple.
I have my thoughts. John, you want to go first since I've been flipping out about neck tattoos that say I love NIST?
I love NIST. I think that you can always self-assess, but it's better to get somebody else external because that's going to bring out your pain points. That's going to bring out what's actually happening because it's easy to turn around and say, yeah, everything's good. I know it's good.
Right. Okay.
Self-assess. I mean, the tools are good because they'll kind of get you through the workflow of what's up. Also, here's another IDK is in chat. IDK was saying that this stream he just jumped in, or she just jumped in. I'm not sure on the gender, and was like, "Oh, what a lifesaver this stream is." So obviously working in GRC space. Here's something that oh my god, I just lost my thought. Hold on. What did you just ask? I'm sorry. I have a really good thought.
Self-assessment.
Oh, self-assessment. Yeah. Okay. So what you're gonna find, like as the stream goes on, like if you go back and look at the thumbnail that capped when the screen started, my hair was flat, and it's just like gone progressively more up. So the thing that you're gonna find, and this is a startling reality that no one talks about. I feel like this is another thing that is just like. The GRC people want you to experience the pain because they experience the pain, okay? When you start reading the language of these controls, they're not going to read like English. They're going to read in a way that is like you'll read the words out loud. It will be English. You will be able to speak them and you'll hear them, but it won't make any sense and you'll be like, what did I just say? What are they trying to ask here? I don't get it. And like it'll talk about executive orders and like there's a lot of like placeholders for variables that are yet to be defined, and it's just it really turns into a headache. So self-assessment is good, but you may actually run into a situation where you don't even know how to answer the question that you're self-assessing, and it gets really easy to get frustrated and skip a question or give a half a answer. And then you get to the point where John said, everything's fine here. So hopefully with an external auditor, you get a more comprehensive coverage of everything. And final thing I'll say, And this is so true. Craig, I don't know if you've dealt with this yet. John, you absolutely have dealt with this. And anyone in chat, I know Alana has definitely dealt with this. Listen to me and believe me, you will do an assessment. You do the most perfect assessment ever. You understand every question. You understand every technical control. Everybody in the business is really honest with you for some reason all of a sudden. And then you're going to look at everything and you're going to be like, holy crap, we are in trouble. We need to do this, this, and this, okay? Then you take your results and you take them to leadership and you're like, you're never going to believe this. We have to do this, this, and this. And they're going to say, that's great. Like, nice job, Craig. We'll talk about it. And then nothing will happen. Then you hire someone externally. You don't even tell them to do the assessment. You just hand them your results. This is a bit facetious, but stay with me. They're going to find the same things you found. And they're going to go and hand it to the boss. And the boss is going to be like, wow, you know what? Like, I don't know what we were doing before you came in here as an external contractor and did this work because we were really lost. Craig, you should definitely read this report. And you're going to want to rip your hair out. But for some reason, the external auditor's findings are going to get funded. So you're going to be happy because you're going to get money for your budget.
Yeah.
But you're going to be like, why?
Lived experience.
Yeah.
Right back to the question.
And if you're in chat and you're hearing this for the first time, spoiler alert, just get ready.
Yeah, it's really understanding. And I think the other thing is when you can't get people in the room who need to be in the room to talk about it, it's a good indicator of where the business is going, right? Because if you can't bring people in to start to be responsible to talk about it, then you'll find those difficulties when you do those self-assessments. You will uncover the pain points and friction points, right? Because I would love to have an experience like you talked about, Gerald. That'd be great.
Oh, yeah. To get the buy-in after the external audit.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's and then this is like a masterclass in GRC. Like this is like a first episode of a masterclass on GRC. Like there's all sorts of things like political capital. Like you might be able to get some initiative pushed forward, but you're going to spend all your political capital, Craig, and then you're going to piss off Carla, who is in charge of finance, and the CEO is going to bring the hammer down on Carla. And get those business email compromise controls put in place. But next time you need some help or some budget or something, oh, so sorry, the budget's not coming through this year, CFO said. Yeah. And you're like, oh, God, I've done it.
Yeah.
I've done it now.
Yeah, those are all part of it. You've got people and, they have parts and stakes of the business, and you really have to get their buy-in. And like Gerald said, sometimes you will expend some of that capital and you won't be able to leverage more. And I've seen it.
It's brilliant. And it's very insightful. It's almost like you need to have a set of podcast episodes to walk people. Hey, we're all going to go through, this framework. So if you're a noob, you can hang out and you can do this with us all together.
Yeah. I mean, I know most of the people in chat have already taken my GRC course, but I literally have a GRC course on my school where it's just 8 hours of me losing my mind, except in a structured fashion.
I took it and I learned some stuff. So I appreciate the efforts. It was insightful. I like the structure, and I encourage anybody else to take that course too.
Cool. Thanks, John. I didn't know you were a student. Cool.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
There you go. Hey, well, we're kind of coming up on time unless there's anything else you guys want to dive into. My brain's fried.
No, this was an awesome Friday afternoon activity. I just wholeheartedly appreciate the invitation, Craig, to be on your podcast, and I love chat bringing the heat today, becoming correct. So good times. And John, great to have a conversation. Finally, put eyes on you instead of just DMs.
Yeah.
For sure.
All good. Well, what we typically
thank you both.
So I think that this where's my saxy French? We always end with the saxy French. I don't know why you're talking. And so thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. I learned a lot. And we'll post this online here shortly.